Hi, welcome back to the basement. I'm Steve Lewis. Today I'd like to continue our periodic look at Beach Boy album covers and the information that can be gleaned from them. We're up to the 80s now, and while the 80s may have been a rough patch for Beach Boy music, I'd say it was a much rougher patch for Beach Boy album covers. Released in March of 1980 was the Keepin The Summer Alive album with its cover artwork by illustrator John Alvin. John Alvin had a long and distinguished career as an illustrator, mainly doing posters and campaigns for movies. His big breakthrough came in 1974 with Blazing Saddles, and he would go on to do posters and illustrations for such films as E.T., Blade Runner, The Lion King, Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, and the Lord of the Rings trilogy. 200 movie campaigns in all were illustrated by John Alvin. So Keepin The Summer Alive was a bit of an odd commission for him. Even in 1980, he had already pretty much established himself as a movie poster artist. Of course, his movie poster artwork appeared on the cover of a lot of soundtrack albums, but the only actual album cover illustrations that I can find both predate his breakthrough with Blazing Saddles in 1974. They're both obscure albums, the first being the Havenstock River Band in 1972 and the Brownstone album in 1973. I'm not sure where the concept for the Keepin The Summer Alive album cover came from, whether it was from Tony Lane, the CBS art director, or from somebody else. John Alvin said that this concept did not come from him, it was given to him, but he couldn't remember specifically where it originated. As I've said here before, this is the first album that came out after I decided to become a Beach Boy completist. And I clearly remember walking into a record store at the Christown Mall in Phoenix, Arizona in March of 1980, seeing a bin of these new Keepin The Summer Alive albums, and my first thought was, oh geez, that's too bad. Well, maybe the Beach Boys will do a good album next year. It was clearly a case of judging an album by the cover, but this cover did not promise good things. I disliked the literal depiction of Keepin The Summer Alive with the surfboards and the woman in the bikini. It almost seemed like the band was being presented as some kind of a museum artifact, stuck in a fun-in-the-sun summer beach time warp and cut off from the rest of the world, which was not a good look for any band that wanted to be seen as vital in 1980. At the same time, I felt there was a limp sense of trying to do something vaguely sci-fi, since that's what the kids are into. It's a similar feeling that I had the prior summer with the album cover for Wings' Back to the Egg album, but at least this one was a little more aesthetically pleasing. Truthfully, I also thought the band was rendered clumsily with some of the proportions not quite right. It's especially noticeable on Bruce's right arm and Mike's left leg. Also, Bruce seems to have legs like an ostrich that come up to the middle of his chest, and Mike seems to have legs like a dachshund. John Alvin was certainly capable of rendering perfectly proportioned figures, so I took this as a sign that the painting was done quickly. The figures are arranged in the composition kind of haphazardly and undramatically, like they were drawn separately and then just stuck in wherever they happened to fit. Carl and Alan come off pretty well. They're facing toward the viewer. Mike looks like he's off balance, and he's also sort of staring off into space for some unknown reason. Bruce is back here kind of scowling at the three of them. And then you've got Brian back here discreetly put behind a piano. Now, they could be a little flattering with Carl, but in 1980, Brian's girth would have been hard to get around. I'm sorry about the pun. So I'm sure that's why they put him behind the piano. But then he doesn't seem to be playing the piano. They've got him in this very harsh profile, almost like an Egyptian tomb painting or something, staring at Dennis for some unknown reason. And Dennis is looking off into space like he's rocking out or something. This could have been strengthened if they had brought Mike forward and had him also facing forward, maybe also Bruce. If more of them had been facing forward, they could have strengthened the presentation a little bit. It would have helped some. Bruce is back on the cover and back in the band, which is nice to see. Of course, he'd been pictured on the inner sleeve of the Light album, but at that point he was still an outside producer working with the Beach Boys rather than a member of the band. He refers to himself as an outside producer on the promotional album for Keepin The Summer Alive too, at the point where he's doing the final album mixes. So his status as a member of the Beach Boys must have been settled fairly late in the proceedings, and it's kind of surprising that he managed to be depicted on the album cover, that the timing worked out for that. Nice to see him back, though. It also struck me as a little odd that the beach towel reads Beach Boys World Tour 1980, as if the album was just meant to publicize their upcoming summer tour rather than stand on its own. The lettering on the beach towel is actually more prominent than the actual album title, which is in small print down at the bottom. And this title was especially hard to see when it was in a bin at the record store, making it appear that the album's title is actually Beach Boys World Tour 1980. Dean Torrance's Beach Boys logo, designed for 15 Big Ones, is back on the front cover, and it's presented as an outline, making it relatively indistinct against the prominent blue-gray that dominates the cover. I'd have thought they'd have wanted the Beach Boys name displayed a little more clearly. People have certainly noted that you have Arctic polar bears and Antarctic penguins both depicted on the cover, but this little bit of geographic or zoological inconsistency is the least of this cover's problems. The back cover, as often with Beach Boy covers, is very empty. It's just more of this blue-gray with some mountains and some penguins thrown in. And in a sign of the changing times, you have a barcode on a new Beach Boy album for the first time. The back cover lists the tracks with the notation "See label for sequence," which I suppose indicates that the track sequence wasn't finalized until quite late in the process, after the cover had gone to press. Inner sleeve photography was by Gary Nickeman, who was best known at this point as the photographer for Steve Martin's 1978 album A Wild and Crazy Guy. This album, incidentally, also features graphics by Dean Torrance. Gary Nickeman would go on to do more photography for album covers in the future, particularly for former Bird Gene Clark. Unlike the bright, colorful pictures inside the Light album sleeve, these photos are in a subdued black and white, which I suspected was a cost-cutting measure and took as a sign that CBS had little faith in the album. As with the Light album, the photos are mostly the group in the studio, presumably working on the album. The two photos of Dennis, however, are on-stage photos from concerts, which could easily tip the fact that Dennis was not present or only minimally involved in recording the album. And here's some Beach Boy trivia for you. Which Beach Boy is not credited on the inner sleeve of Keepin' the Summer Alive? The answer is Mike Love. It lists musicians and starts with Brian, Carl, Dennis, Al, Bruce, former Beach Boy Ricky Fatar, and lists 21 others, including Ricky Martin, Joe Walsh, Daryl Dragon, and Caleb Quay, but as lead singer, Mike Love is not credited. I really can't believe that Mike was okay with this. You would have thought they would have changed it to performers and credited Mike Love instead of just calling it musicians. But anyway, Mike Love is not credited inside the album. The other side of the inner sleeve includes the same kind of crazily detailed technical notes we've seen on a number of Beach Boys albums going all the way back to Sunflower, and which the Beach Boys themselves parodied on the inner sleeve of Surf's Up. I assume these are included for some kind of promotional consideration. The last bit really seems kind of goofy to me. It reads, "All selections were recorded in true stereophonic sound with special attention to spatial perspective. This type of recording is much more exciting to hear since it fills the room with sound, much as would be present in a live perspective." It seems like you'd normally let the record speak for itself rather than telling a person who's already bought the album that this is going to be much more exciting to listen to. Anyway, my initial hope that the Beach Boys would do a better album in 1981 was not realized. Wasn't realized in 1982 or 83, the year we lost Dennis. 1984 wasn't until 1985 that we got the next Beach Boy album, and arguably a worse Beach Boy album cover. For me, one of the charms of the Beach Boys is even their biggest failures are usually interesting failures, and while I dislike the cover of Keepin' the Summer Alive, it is at least kind of interesting. That is not the case with the Beach Boys' 1985 album titled simply and boringly The Beach Boys. While I don't think the cover of Keepin' the Summer Alive succeeds, I think I can at least understand what they were going for, but I don't even really feel like I can understand the thought process behind the cover of The Beach Boys. It seems to me if you had set out to create an album cover that would be easy to ignore, you couldn't have done much better than the cover of The Beach Boys. And it's really surprising too, because I think there were high hopes for this album, much higher than there had been for Keepin' the Summer Alive. They put a lot of work into this, and I think it was meant to be the beginning of a new era for the Beach Boys. Then after all that work, they gave it this generic title and put it in the least interesting cover that I could ever conceive of. You don't even get the Beach Boys logo. You just get these block letters on this off-white background with some sort of dull tropical coastline motif. You've got all these dull colors. There are palm trees, but they look mostly brown and gray. The beach seems to be covered in brown, rotting kelp, and there's a strip of desolate-looking stone gray mountains in the background. This doesn't look like a beach you'd party on. This looks like a beach you'd need to be rescued from. I'd be happy if they got away from the beach motif entirely, but if they were going to do it, I don't know why they didn't go with something a little more cheerful and some bright colors in the background at the very least. Now in '71, they had deliberately gone somber with the Surf's Up album, but that was a deliberate choice. The intention was clear. Here, it just looks like somebody picked out the ugly wallpaper. The back cover has a small photo of the band. Again, it's completely generic, a sort of standard publicity photo with showbiz smiles and a standard wispy cloud background. It's a pretty amazingly amateurish presentation for a major act. They might have just dropped by the family photo center at Sears or Kmart and gotten the same result. Maybe they did. Sears might have done a deal for them for some 8x10s and some wallet-sized photos they could give to their families. Maybe one of them had a coupon out of the penny saver or something. They saved a little bit of money on their photos that way. The back cover also has a track listing and some credits, as you'd expect. And for some reason, there's a little mock-up of the front cover on the back, which I suppose saves turning it over again to confirm how forgettable it is. As is traditional with a lot of Beach Boy records, there's a lot of wasted white empty space here with nothing particularly going on. There's a dedication. This album is dedicated to the memory of our beloved brother, cousin, and friend. It's nice that there's a dedication, but it seems pretty minimal. And I've always thought it was peculiar that they didn't mention Dennis by name. Maybe they thought it went without saying, I don't know. The inner sleeve is on plain off-white paper, which is duller and more subdued than the glossy stock they'd used on the inner sleeve of the last couple of albums. But it does have the advantage of being a little bit less brittle and a little bit less prone to tearing when you take the album in and out of the sleeve. Side 1 of the inner sleeve features the Beach Boys block letters with the tropical background again, this time rendered in muddy black and white. There are many production, engineering, and technical support credits from both the UK and the US, and something I do appreciate, which are credits for the players on each track and the lyrics. The other side continues the song lyrics and credits and features 4 muddy black and white photos which the text tells us are the winners of the Keepin The Summer Alive photo contest. Over the years I've tried without success to find out more about the Keepin The Summer Alive photo contest. If the prize was to have the photo included in the next Beach Boys album, I admire the follow-through on their part for actually including the winners 5 years after Keepin The Summer Alive. Based on the content of some of these photos, I also remember wondering if there had been any more than 4 entries in the contest in the first place. I know I've been pretty hard on this album cover and it's easy to heap on abuse. It seems like the music was meant to reach a new audience and I just can't see anything here that's designed to draw in a new audience in any way. It's a sadly missed opportunity. If it was meant to be the beginning of a new era for the Beach Boys, sadly that didn't come to pass. It would be another 4 years until there'd be a new Beach Boy album, and even that one wouldn't be a completely new album drawing on some old tracks. We'll have to leave that one for next time. I hope you enjoyed this. Please let me know if you have a different perspective on this. I know on the MIU album, some people came back to me with a very different take on the MIU album, and I found it really interesting. So if you have a different take or any additional information on these albums, please let me know what you think. If anybody knows about that photo contest, please let me know. Anyway, thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed this. Please like and subscribe. Love to hear your comments, and we'll see you next time. Thanks for watching. Bye.